Hi, everybody. Analisa Six here with the Lady of Leisure and the Sober Curator to bring you the November 2024 horoscopes and astrology forecast for the month of November, the year 2024. It's mid-November already. I think it's November 13th today that I'm recording this. Yeah, and I didn't get on it. I didn't get on November horoscopes and forecast in time. This is kind of a theme for me. If you've been around for a while, I tend to post these late most of the time. And yeah, it's just, I don't get paid to do these. I do them as a labor of love for the community and the Sober Curator. So if I have other life stuff going on that kind of feels like it takes priority, I do that. And I always try to get these done at some point, but it's not a paid gig, and it's not number one priority in my life right now, but I do love doing them. I love being an astrologer. I love my clients that I do have, and I love talking about astrology for the month. So I feel like better late than never. It goes out into the ether. It's free. You know, I like doing it. I'll continue to do it as much as I like doing it. Um, Part of the reason I do kind of want to share some personal stuff, which I know that if you're watching, you're not here for personal Annalisa stuff, you're here for, um, astrology, forecast, insight. But one of the reasons why I was super late to getting these done is because I was in Montreal, kind of taking back a certain time period of my life and redefining it. And it had me thinking a lot about this time last year and the role that astrology played in my life. And I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of that anecdotally before getting into the month, because I think that it's kind of helpful with where we're at in time right now. November of 2024 is a big year. We just had the presidential election happen in November. And it's, for a lot of people, very concerning what is happening, in our country, in the United States right now. So this time last year in October, I recorded all of the horoscopes on October 31st for the month of November. And then the next day, my entire life fell apart. My husband left me, and it just basically sparked, a completely new chapter of my life. And one of the things that was really interesting was that week where I was alone in my house, I watched the horoscope videos that I had done the day before it all happened, for my sign. And I think I watched them for his sign too. And it was just so weird watching myself say certain things that I felt like I was living. I didn't say like every Leo or Sagittarius rising is going to be left by their partner of 14 years. But, I was talking about relationships, shared resources, assets, changes happening around, those things. And so it was just interesting. It was a fun way to watch my life fall apart. And, I've done the same thing with the election and with kind of some of the political stuff going on. And I'm not an electional astrologer. I do not like to talk about politics or world events. I'm a transpersonal astrologer. I center on human-centered astrology and personal growth as a individual in this lifetime, with some esoteric and evolutionary things thrown in there, and some traditional astrology things thrown in there, but I'm not, an electional astrologer, so I don't talk about it. But I do want to say that a year ago this time, I did start to look at the election, and I had no idea that Kamala Harris was going to be in the election back then. But looking at Trump's chart, Biden's chart, looking at all the things, I definitely was of the ilk that Trump was most likely going to win. And a few months ago, I did a class with a student who was having a lot of stress about the election. And we looked at the charts, and I was very much like, it looks like Trump is going to win. So, but, not necessarily win in a fair way, not necessarily win in a way that was actually, correct. Like there's a lot of astrological signatures for fraud and just rigging, the results and things like that. There's a lot of that around the astrology, and there's a lot happening cosmically that is really similar to what was happening in the 20s and 30s of the 1900s. So it's kind of just interesting watching those trends. And as I get into the astrology for November, we are going to, kind of go over some transits that are pretty major around that time period of just a couple weeks ago. And it's just, I think for me, like, I'm talking about this stuff because, like my life fell apart a year ago and I'm in a completely different place in my life. And the worst thing felt like it was happening to me. And in a way it was. I mean, it's one of the worst things I've ever been through in my life. And I've been through a lot. Like I'm a child of divorce. I'm a child of, certain abuse that was happening in my household growing up. Um, I would say that I would say 50% of my life was very blessed and very privileged and very easy. And then I would say 50% of my life was, like, depending on which side you hear about, my life sounds really great in one way growing up. And then the other side of it is like, holy cow, messy, messed up, and I think that's really common for a lot of us. But I think that one of the things that I'm just saying is, like, last year, one of the worst things, like my worst fear in terms of my relationship falling apart and the way that it fell apart, it wasn't like something I, you know, wanted, or, I tried to get in front of it too. Like, being an astrologer, there was things that I saw and I was like trying to get in front of things and I couldn't do anything about it. Like, everything was just happening and I couldn't do anything, like all I could do was focus on myself, my own healing and my own growth and how I responded to what was happening in my life. I couldn't control what he was doing. I couldn't control, what everyone else around me was doing, family members, all that kind of stuff. It was really, really hard. And I think that a lot of us feel that way about the state of the world, you know, constantly, especially when it comes to political changes or world events, that are happening. It's really easy for us to spin out and kind of have like existential dread. I've been somebody that's lived in that for so long, especially pandemic stuff. But I think that one of the values that astrology has served for me is that there is just a lot we can't control. And there's things that I believe at this point are fated and destined to be. My divorce was in my birth chart. I watched the transits happen this entire last year around my divorce and, in my partner's chart too, my ex-partner, like watching that stuff, people's in my life whose charts I've had, I've watched the role they've played in my life. And, I did the same thing with the election and with the, presidential candidates. And I think that, it's not like I want certain outcomes to happen. It's that they happen, they happen. And no matter what I do to try to get in front of it, things just happen the way that they're supposed to happen or what's meant to be. And I definitely believe in fate. I believe that we have only so much power to influence ourselves and our own journey. Like, we can make choices in our own life, but we can't control other people. We can't control if somebody else wants certain things in life. We can't control, like, we can show up and vote and we can have a say in whatever way we try to have, but we can't control a rigged election. There's just a lot of things that I think astrology has helped me kind of accept. And I'm also in AA, and these horoscopes and this astrology forecasting I do for the Sober Curator, which is a sobriety focused lifestyle online magazine. And the serenity prayer, God, give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to accept the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That prayer has got me through this year because I can't control a lot about the world and about life. I really can't. And it's like astrology, like, you can't control the orbit of the planet. It's like they're doing their thing. That's science has its own magic to it that we can respond and we can show up, but it's like none of us have power over the sun. None of us have power over the moon. The earth is spinning and we're on it. Like, we're just on it. Like, we don't have power over that. All we have is power over how we show up and how we wake up every day. And, it's like we might wake up in a good mood, but somebody else could come in and start honking their horn at us and putting their bad energy into us. And the only thing we have control over is how we meet that, how we respond to it, how we let it affect us. And we just have to show up and keep living in alignment and in integrity with our own beliefs and values, right? So I think that for me, astrology has been a really a guiding light in that, because a lot of times I'll sit and kind of be like frustrated at the season of life that I'm in, or the season of life that we're in as a community or a culture or a world. And then I kind of start to research the past, or like transits or things that are happening, and it's just going to happen, like I think we do all have a lot of power as people to come together and make changes, and I think that we are given an opportunity with Pluto and Aquarius to really do that as a people. I'm not saying we don't have free will or power to influence, but I think the stage gets set for these changes within time, and there's a reason for it. Okay, so let's get into November. So November 1st, I'm going to share my screen, but I want to make sure I get rid of some of the background crap that I have on my computer here. My dogs are chewing on their cheese. I give my dogs those little yak cheese chews, and they love them, but they're kind of noisy. And my younger dog, Cosmo, he is still dealing with some noise sensitivity when our neighbors come and go. So he might randomly bark at times. I apologize for that because it's loud and obnoxious. Okay, so sharing my screen. I'm trying to see if I can get me a little bit bigger. Why isn't it giving me that arrow to do that? I've done it before. I know that's up there, but I don't want to do, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to stay little. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into this. If you're new here, I go through every single day of the month. I don't always talk about the lunar transits unless it's a full or new moon. I mostly just kind of go through the highlights of each transit for each day and try to talk about it as quickly as I can to keep this video within an hour. So it's easy to just talk forever with astrology. So on November 1st, we start out the month with a bang. We have a new moon at 9 degrees Scorpio. So every November we're in Scorpio season. Happy birthday to all of the November Scorpios. And then mid-month, we're closer to the end of the month, we enter Sagittarius season. So happy birthday to all the November Sagittarius dominant people. And I think it's really special when we have a new moon line up with the beginning of November, because the holidays that take place from October 31st. I mean, I think there's one on October 30th too, but October 31st to November 2nd are, the Catholic observed holidays that have to do with honoring the underworld and, those who have passed over. And, Catholics took a lot of those old holidays from indigenous and pagan communities. So, Halloween was observed as Samhain, and then we have on November 1st, All Saints Day, which is a Catholic holiday. And then on November 2nd, that's when Dia de los Muertos happens, Day of the Dead. And that actually is also a Catholic holiday that was blended with indigenous traditions from the various cultures in Mexico. And so whenever we have a new moon or a full moon fall on those days at the beginning of November during Scorpio season, I think it's really special and amazing, because essentially, new moons are a time for rebirth and planting seeds. And Scorpio season being that fixed water sign of the zodiac, it rules the underworld. It rules transformation, death, rebirth, all of that. So we started November out with this dark new moon energy in Scorpio, on a sacred holiday. All Saints Day is what it sounds like. It's the Day of the Saints. And, it's sandwiched between Samhain and Dia de los Muertos. So we've got kind of this cool time to honor those who've crossed over, that kind of polarity between the dark and light. It said that the veil is very thin and that we have access to ancestors and people that have crossed over. And it's a really positive time for doing rituals around that energy. So pretty great in that way. November 2nd is a pretty intense day transit wise. We start out in the early AM. Jupiter is making a sextile to Chiron and Aries. Then we have Mercury and Scorpio making a trine to Mars and Cancer. And then we have Mercury and Scorpio sextiling Pluto and Capricorn. And then Mercury in the afternoon enters Sagittarius. And Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius until, let's see here. It's a long time because Mercury stations retrograde at the end of the month. So Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius until January 8th. So we have this frequency of energy for the whole month of November before it stations retrograde. We'll talk about Mercury stationing retrograde later. But, you know, those AM hour transits are still influencing us for the beginning days of the month. So that Jupiter sextile to Chiron, you know, we have Jupiter in Gemini and Chiron in Aries. And Jupiter is that planet of expansion and growth. It really wants us to grow beyond where we've been in terms of, you know, Gemini themes, which is kind of more like simplified learning, communication, perspectives, how we analyze a situation. And Aries, Chiron and Aries has a lot to do with identity wounds, and sextiles are harmonious, you know, so there's an opportunity on this day, on the 2nd, for us to grow beyond where we've been in terms of a certain mindset. Then it's spiritual. It's a spiritual alchemical process with Jupiter being involved. Mercury and Scorpio trining Mars and Cancer. This is a really powerful energy for being able to articulate and communicate feelings in a very direct and confrontational way. It can be difficult and challenging, but it can also be a really positive time for healing and feeling like we have more of a direct line towards how we're communicating our feelings. You know, Mercury and Scorpio can be really reactive. Mars and Cancer can be really reactive. So it can be easy to take things personally. But at the same time, if we need to get something off our chest or kind of have these deeper insights or conversations about things, that can be really positive too, depending on where it's hitting in your chart. Mercury and Scorpio sextile Pluto and Capricorn right before it enters Sagittarius is a really good opportunity for us releasing and letting go some other kind of perspective or idea that's been weighing heavy on us. I am going to share anecdotally that November 2nd was my wedding anniversary, and my husband left me the day before on the 1st last year. And so I went to Montreal on this time period to basically like redefine and take back these dates for myself and do something that is completely out of the ordinary. And I have a boyfriend and he lives there. He's from there. That's why I went there. But, you know, he made sure that we did a bunch of stuff that was kind of like new memories, redefining things for me. And it was great. You know, it was exactly what I needed. I have these great memories in a place that didn't remind me of anything of my past because it was all completely new. And I'm bringing that up because these transits, like Mercury and Scorpio specifically, has a lot to do with pain from the past. You know, it's like that 6 of Cups energy reversed in the tarot, where maybe we feel very nostalgic or reflective on things from the past that could be really heavy for us. And they're not necessarily bad memories, but maybe we're having kind of this new transformational period around how we view or feel about certain things. And, you know, there's an opportunity for growth and change and evolution with the transits to Mars and Pluto. So, and this is also about how we communicate. Like maybe we're growing beyond a way that we've communicated in the past. So, you know, then we have that new moon kind of influence over that. So November was a really good time for kind of embracing some sort of change in your life around how you perceive things or how you are working through something. And that's just what I'm going through. I mean, everybody has their own thing. Like it could be different for you. You know, it could be something just in terms of how you're viewing a new relationship, a new career. Maybe you're moving or living somewhere. You know, a new pet. I've got my new dog. So then when Mercury enters Sagittarius and is there for the rest of the month, especially with it stationing retrograde, Sagittarius is a completely different energy than Scorpio. It's the mutable fire sign of the zodiac, and Sagittarius rules the 9th house. It's ruled by the planet Jupiter. Sagittarius has everything to do with our values, our belief systems, spiritual beliefs. It's also the sign of the seeker. It's the sign that represents our connection to spiritual freedom, spiritual seeking, philosophy, psychology, metaphysical studies, cultural studies. It's also the sign of long distance travel. Sagittarius is Mercury's sign of detriment. So it's also kind of interesting is that we have Jupiter in Gemini, which is Jupiter's sign of detriment. And now Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini, is in Jupiter's home sign, and it's Mercury's sign of detriment. And so, Mercury doesn't necessarily operate the best here. It can be kind of more blown out and a little less linear or scientifically focused, but it's also a really positive time to assess whether or not you're living in alignment with your values or your belief systems. You might be wanting to learn and grow more or beyond where you've been with certain things. It could also be a period of time where you're feeling like there's changes that need to be made in your life so that you feel more aligned with your values or your belief systems. So those are things that come up. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to November 3rd. So on November 3rd, we're going to have Mars in Cancer making an opposition to Pluto in Capricorn. This can feel like a very intense energy when it comes to almost like a restlessness around kind of where we feel like we need to direct our energy emotionally. We feel change, we feel transformation, we could feel irritable and uncomfortable with some of that change. Venus in Sagittarius is opposite Jupiter in Gemini, and then is also making a trine to Chiron in Aries. So Venus is the planet that rules our relationships and our connection to relationships and romance. And so when she's making, aspects to things, it brings up relationship issues for us. And in Sagittarius, it's those themes again, values, beliefs. It can also represent, long distance travel and culture and learning through other cultures or places. And her opposition to Jupiter, it could be requiring us to grow somewhere in a new way in a relationship than where we've been. Venus and Jupiter are also considered to be beneficial planets. And so this can also be a really beneficial time for growth within a relationship. And then trining Chiron, there can be triggers or issues around identity. So the autonomy part of an individual mixed with the identity of a relationship. How do you connect in a relationship without losing yourself? Those are themes. Maybe you're building a new dream with someone or a new idea with someone that is different than what you thought you would be doing, in your life. Or maybe there's, some kind of way that you feel like you're evolving within a relationship that's new. If you're in a relationship or you're single, sorry, I said that wrong. If you're in a relationship where you feel like things are not moving forward, or you're single and you feel like things are not moving forward when it comes to relationships, these transits are also an opportunity for you to really ask yourself what it is you want and get more clear about what it is you want, even if it's still confusing. Because Sagittarius Gemini energy can feel confusing sometimes because we're kind of analyzing a lot of different things. We're looking at a lot of different, potentials essentially. But that can be positive because maybe we're in a state of exploring, maybe more of kind of what we are open to. I know for me, like there's no way I ever thought I would be open to what my life is doing now, but I am. Like I'm watching myself kind of go, oh wow, I actually am a lot more open to this than I ever knew. So, even if you're single, like that can be part of it, right? Like you can kind of be reflecting on just what's presenting itself to you and reflecting on, do I have the same values or beliefs I had 5 years ago? How is that evolving? How are the people that are coming into my life shaping that evolution for me? Mars later in the evening on the 3rd enters Leo, and Mars is going to be in Leo for a long time too, because Mars in December stations retrograde in Leo. So starting on the 3rd, we have Mars in Leo for the rest of November. And, Mars in Cancer is not my favorite. It's fall in Cancer, so it's exalted in Capricorn. I would prefer Mars in Leo energy, especially as a Leo, because Mars, is more activated in a fire sign. But one of the things about Mars and Leo that's still kind of, not great is that Leo energy that's very egotistical and self-centered and arrogant at times is elevated. So that reactive, spicy kind of energy that Mars has innately just can be kind of turned up a notch. However, Leo being the sign of joy, self-expression, leadership, there's all these kind of like fun aspects to Leo. The creative aspect to Leo gets amplified. And so this can be a really good time with Mars here, especially with Mercury in Sagittarius, Venus in Sagittarius, to really amplify creative energy, sexual energy, energy towards passion projects, things like that. But it can also be very Knight of Wands, Five of Wands kind of energy where we get too impulsive, too impatient, too reactive. So we have to be mindful there. All right, so let's get going here. November 4th, we've got the Sun in Scorpio making a trine to Saturn in Pisces. Now, as someone in recovery, these transits, when we have heavy water transits, especially Saturn to Sun transits, these transits can lean towards depression, existential dread, existential crises, all of those types of feelings. And so we might start out the week of the 4th feeling a lot of existential woes and anxieties and depression, heaviness. What's interesting is the election was the next day. So I know a lot of people were feeling that way prior to the election. The advice on these transits, from my perspective, from my astrological perspective, is to really lean into what that energy is trying to teach you. There's a lesson with depression that I'm missing. There's like this tagline kind of thing that I'm not going to remember, but I'm going to try to explain it instead of remembering like the tagline. But you know how like certain frequencies of energy have a polarity that like sometimes there's a positive and a negative to the energy frequency. So like when we talk about anxiety and excitement, they're on the same frequency of energy, but on one side, anxiety feels more like this negative thing, like I don't want to have anxiety. But if we turn our perspective on it and go, oh, this is on the same frequency of excitement. So instead of feeling anxious, we could get excited about this. It changes it. Like that's part of the way that we can transmute an energy that we're feeling. Depression is the same. Depression is on a frequency of energy that feels really like dark, dismal, like, lethargic, woe is me. But one of the frequencies that we can transmute depression to is, this is the part of like the word or the tagline that I'm not thinking of. It's not rest and it's not peace, but it's kind of like in those lines, and a lot of creative energy can come up here. So if we can use our kind of heavier energy, this like depressive energy, in a way where we actually are honoring space, we're honoring quiet. There's a lot of forms of meditation that do this, where you learn how to be kind of more at peace with the dark, essentially, the void, and seeing that all things kind of come out of this nothingness, and knowing that that's part of the balance. We've got the output and the input at the yin and the yang. This yin kind of inner energy is where depression lives, but it doesn't have to be depressing. It can also be a time where we really honor the darkness. We honor that space. And that's how these transits are to me. So like Sun in Scorpio, trining Saturn in Pisces, where do you honor the yin aspects in your life, that water energy? And water rules our emotions. It rules our connection to our psychic centers. Transcendental meditation can live here. Our connection to writing music and poetry and doing art can be a part of this. If you're into dream work, or channeling, that all can live in here too. Sound baths, that kind of stuff. Alcoholism and escapism through drugs is also part of this frequency of energy. But like when we think about what am I trying to like depression, I think also too it's a symptom of feeling disconnected from your soul or some kind of source energy. How do we connect back to that? What are the ways that we do that? Addicts think that we're doing it through substances. When we break free of that illusion, we can do it on our own through art, music, meditation, that kind of thing. So the fourth is an opportunity for a lot of that energy to play a role. On election day, we don't have any major transits. We had the moon entering Capricorn in the early hours, and that was it. On the 6th, again, moon in Capricorn, not a lot. We're still in an orb of influence of those earlier day transits, but we don't have anything specific until the 7th, where we're going to have the moon enter Aquarius, and then Venus in Sagittarius is going to make an inconjunct, or what's also known as a quincunx, to Uranus and Taurus. And, this can bring up changes in relationship dynamics. Uranus is considered to be the planet that is the destroyer. It brings change. But the change that Uranus is supposed to bring is supposed to be good for the evolution of the self. And in a relationship with Venus, whether it's a relationship to friends, lovers, business partners, ourselves in some way, Uranus is here to kind of help us break beyond maybe somewhere that we've been stuck. And, this Venus and Sagittarius energy is really trying to help us grow and evolve beyond where we've been when it comes to relationship dynamics. So I think that that's a positive thing. Okay, so getting to November 8th, we have a first quarter moon in Aquarius. It's 17 degrees Aquarius. Now, first quarter moons are a really positive time for setting intentions that kind of play upon what we were doing during the new moon. Aquarius energy is the energy of community, friendship, organization, groups. It's also social change. So, I know a lot of people after the election were very upset at the results. Even if you weren't upset at the results, this energy is great for setting intentions towards who you want to be in your community and where you want to influence change in your community. Now, I will say, like, I'm a progressive. I'm not a Trump supporter at all. Not necessarily pro what the Democratic Party has been doing either, but I am a feminist and I would love to see a woman in office. But I'll be honest, I don't think the last 4 years with Biden in office were very great either. I'm pretty disappointed in the Democratic Party right now on a personal level, but I am a progressive, and so I think that the frequency of energy that a lot of other progressives feel, is like, how can we enact some social change where, we might feel helpless, in certain ways, but what can we do? So this first quarter moon, is a great opportunity for us to really ask ourselves that around the 8th, what's the role that I play in my community? How do I want to show up in my community? What intentions can I set towards that? On the 9th, we're going to have Venus squaring Neptune in the early AM hours. And, Venus square to Neptune is interesting. We can feel confused about a relationship. Maybe there's some illusions that are, kind of happening around a relationship dynamic, and we're trying to figure out what the truth is. This energy can also be really positive for creative endeavors, even though there might be some tension there. Squares create a lot of tension. We are more gullible during a transit like this too. So that's something that we need to be mindful of, especially in relationships. The moon enters Pisces later in the day. And then on the 10th, we just have the moon in Pisces. All right, we're getting closer to where we're at right now as I'm recording this. November 11th is Veterans Day, and we have quite a handful of transits here. So the sun is going to make a hard aspect to Jupiter in the early AM hours. It's making an inconjunct to Jupiter. And then later on in the day, we're going to have Venus leaving Sagittarius and entering Capricorn. The sun in Scorpio is going to make an inconjunct to Chiron and Aries. And then later in the day, the moon is going to enter Aries. So if I were to just kind of break this energy down a little bit, there's a lot of potential for irritability and frustration around where we're at versus where we're trying to go and feeling stuck or stagnant in certain ways. Venus in Capricorn is a really positive energy for getting some of more of that chaotic Sagittarius energy that was in the air honed in more on a goal, especially in our relationship dynamics with other people. So getting grounded, getting more clear on what you want. That Venus in Sagittarius was all about exploration Now Venus in Capricorn is all about business. You know, what are we doing? How are we getting it done? And then the hard aspects between the Sun, Jupiter, and the Sun, Chiron, really show where we want to push things forward or what we want to heal, but where we are kind of just having to deal with what's in front of us right now. So, you know, that's there. And then with the moon entering Aries and having the moon in Aries over the next couple of days, the moon in Aries is one of my least favorite placements when it comes to feeling reactive, more volatile. You know, we're a little bit more spicy in a way. The guidance here a lot of times is that we need to go get out and be physically active and get out of our heads and just go do, especially having Venus in Capricorn, because that on the 12th, we've got a moon square to Venus. And, you know, it makes us spicy. It makes us feel more reactive. And that can be positively channeled when we have things to do and channel it into, but it can also kind of build up in us sometimes in a way that can be not nice. We could take it out on other people. On the 12th, we also have Mercury making a square to Saturn. Again, some of these squares to Saturn with certain planets like the Sun, Mercury, can definitely lend us more towards feeling depressed. Like we can feel more of the weight of Saturn, especially in a sign like Pisces. We can also feel more of that like existential woe, like why, you know, Mercury in Sagittarius is very like, why? Like, what is it all for? What does it all mean? Seeking more answers, seeking more truth. And that Saturn energy, it can, you know, in Pisces can get very existential. So we might be in that kind of feeling over the next couple of days. And, you know, spiritual work is heavily encouraged during that. We can also have communication conflict with authority figures during, you know, that kind of thing, that energy. And there's also a huge need for escapism from mundane reality. So getting things done can feel like there's tension. It can feel very Mercury retrograde in certain ways when we have a hard aspect to Mercury, especially with a planet like Saturn. On the 13th, which is today, the only major transit that we have is the moon entering Taurus in the evening. On the 14th, we're going to have Venus in Capricorn making an inconjunct to Mars and Leo. I'm not a huge fan of Venus-Mars transits, just anecdotally, because I just feel like sometimes there's unnecessary, well, I shouldn't say unnecessary, because you know, we think everything happens for a reason. But I think that there can be like mundane conflict in relationship dynamics that's just kind of stupid or whatever. With Venus in conjunct Mars and Leo, we might feel kind of like this push-pull dynamic between the mundane things that we need to get done or acknowledge versus the things that we want to do creatively. Like Mars and Leo is very like, I want this, you know, and I want to do it my way. Venus in Capricorn is also kind of like that, but it's more about responsibilities. And I think that there's a benefit to this energy in terms of getting things done if we really want to be on it, you know, but I think that there can be a little bit of a push-pull of what we have to do versus what we want to do. And, you know, that affects our relationships, like having Venus there. I need to take a drink of this. All right, November 15th, we have a full moon at 24 degrees of Taurus. And Saturn is going to station direct at 12 degrees of Pisces. Saturn stationed retrograde quite a while ago. Let's see, it's stationed retrograde at 19 degrees of Pisces. And now it's stationing direct at 12 degrees of Pisces. So, you know, we've been under a Saturn retrograde since then. And now we're gonna move through those degrees all over again. And it looks like we're going to hit that 19-degree point on February 15th. So think about, you know, the last few months and just what you've been feeling stuck in, because you're going to start getting some momentum wherever Saturn's been retrograde. So you can look at that in your chart too. I'll talk about that in the horoscope videos. So, you know, full moons, again, reminder, time for manifestation and releasing and letting go. Because this is a full moon in Taurus, that means the sun is opposite the moon. So sun in Scorpio is opposite the moon in Taurus. Sun in Scorpio, alchemical transformation, rebirth, Moon in Taurus, this is a great time for manifestation around things that you want to build in the material world. Uranus plays a big role in this, and Neptune. So we have Uranus making a conjunction to this full moon. And again, Uranus is called the destroyer. It brings about change. Something about the way things have been is changing, and this full moon is marking that change. And Taurus, is our connection to the material, our money, our material stability that we feel, in life. That can be so many things, like our home, family, a person, our bodies, like our health, that kind of stuff. So Uranus is here sparking up some change in this. And this is also a powerful time for you to instigate change in your own life too. That serenity prayer comes in handy during all of this. And then later on in the evening, the moon is going to enter Gemini. November 16th, we're going to have the sun in Scorpio making an opposition to that same Uranus and Taurus energy. Already talked about that. We're just under that same influence. Cosmo, can you come get your cheese? Barking, please. Come get your cheese. All right. And then on the 17th, we just have the moon in Gemini all day. Not going to talk about that much. And then starting out the week on the 18th, we're going to have the moon entering Cancer, where it's at home. That's its sign of domicile. We like the moon in Cancer. And then Mercury in Sagittarius is going to make an opposition to Jupiter in Gemini. And the sun in Scorpio is going to make a trine to Neptune in Pisces. To simplify this, this is a really positive energy for creative endeavors and any kind of learning or education. If you are not sober, this could be a detrimental energy for you because there's a lot of desire to overdo or go above and beyond in ways that are not healthy. If you're in recovery, this could be a really great time for making leaps and bounds in your recovery journey and growing beyond where you've been in your understanding of something spiritual or intellectual. If you're thinking about joining an educational program, this is a great time to get more information about it. All of that kind of stuff. I like the note. There's a Mercury note here because we're about to enter Mercury retrograde. And there's a note that the Llewellyn, let's see here. Yeah, there's a note that Llewellyn makes because we're about to enter the shadow, but it says Mercury enters its storm on Thursday, which is the 21st, it looks like, as it slows down before going retrograde. The storm acts like the retrograde, not favorable to start new projects. Just follow through with the items that are already on your plate. Write down new ideas with date and time they occurred. It also says that on the 18th, this is your last chance before Mercury turns retrograde. Use this family-oriented energy suitable for any projects you're involved in. So it says on Thursday we enter the storm. So it's that 18th, 19th, 20th. You kind of have this last little bit before we're in the shadow. They call it the storm in the Llewellyn, but most astrologers that I know, we call it the shadow period before Mercury stations retrograde. And it said for some, the shadow is harder than the retrograde itself. Now, that really depends on your birth chart. I don't like a lot of those generalizations because it really depends on where it's hitting and what it's aspecting in your personal birth chart, how it influences you. Okay, so going to the 19th, we're going to have Mercury is going to trine Chiron in Aries, and then we're going to have Pluto entering Aquarius again. I've talked about Pluto entering Aquarius so many goddamn times in these videos, and I feel like it's just oversaturated, but this could be your first time here. Pluto has been teeter-tottering between Capricorn and Aquarius, but this is the year where it finally just officially stations for the next 20 years. And to just briefly touch on it, since I've touched on it so many times, we are starting the Aquarian age. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be amplifying all things Aquarius: social change, revolutions, political change, activism, huge influence on technology and ramping up AI, like all that kind of stuff is happening. Mercury making that trine to Chiron and Aries. This is an opportunity for us to work on healing beliefs and values in our communication dynamics and how our identity plays a role in that. On the 20th, we don't really have any major transits. The moon is going to enter Leo. And there's obviously stuff with the moon, but I try not to talk too much about that because it would take too long. On Thursday, the 21st, the sun enters Sagittarius, and we also enter that Mercury retrograde shadow. Happy birthday, Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign of the zodiac that rules the ninth house. I talked about that earlier, but Sagittarius is considered to be the sign that is the seeker. It says, I know. It's the knowledge-based sign, the wisdom-based sign. I love Sagittarius energy. I'm Sag rising, and I've got a lot of Sag people in my life, Sag dominant people. Very fun. We like adventure. We like to explore. We like to have a good time. The sun, after it enters Sagittarius, is going to make a harmonious sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. This is a really positive time to connect with your community, you know, and figure out where you can enact some change. Friday, the 22nd, we're going to have a last quarter moon at 1 degree Virgo. Before that, Venus in Capricorn is going to make a harmonious sextile to Saturn in Pisces. So this is actually really positive energy for relationships, connecting emotionally, connecting on shared interests, and even like kind of mundane things that you're fantasizing about creating together. The last quarter moon in Virgo is another positive energy for releasing or letting go anything. See where Virgo is in your chart for that. The 23rd, we just got moon in Virgo energy. The 24th, moon in Virgo energy, making some aspects to things. The 24th, the moon's making some hard aspects to some stuff. So we might feel a little bit like we want to get a lot done, and maybe there's some blocks around that. The 25th, Mercury stations retrograde, and it's going to be stationing retrograde, it looks like, at 22 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's going to stay retrograde until the 15th of December. So, reminder, Mercury retrograde is not encouraged time to sign any contracts, sell or buy anything major. It's not the best time to oh my God, I'm laughing right now. I'm laughing at this right now. This is so crazy. Okay, anecdotal time. Everything with my divorce, paperwork wise, has gotten solidified during Mercury retrogrades. My husband filed for divorce during Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius in December of last year. And what's funny is that our paperwork to finalize our divorce has been taking a lot longer than I feel like it should have. And based off of the trajectory, this would be when it's getting finalized. And I've been able to follow this shit with astrology the whole time because every time Mercury is stationed retrograde, we finalize something. So it's interesting, right? Because here I am saying, you know, from an astrological perspective, we wouldn't advise that. You know, usually that means there's stuff later on that's going to come back where there's going to be regrets. There's going to be maybe things that weren't done properly. And that's happened. You know, every single thing of paperwork, a lot of it's had to come back and be amended and fixed. It always ends up getting done and gets fine eventually, but there's been a lot of that back and forth getting fixed stuff. And a lot of that, you know, they say during Mercury retrograde, you're more prone to those mistakes happening. So it's just funny. It's interesting anecdotally to live through watching it, you know. But that's the advice. You know, if you're gonna sell a car, buy a house, get a divorce, get married during Mercury retrogrades, expect certain things to kind of happen that require you to reflect, review, and reassess. That's what Mercury retrograde is about. The thing about Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius is that we are encouraged to reflect, review, reassess Sagittarius themes. You know, what are our values? What are our beliefs? Are we open to learning beyond where we've been? You know, it's a time for expansion and growth intellectually, philosophically, spiritually, metaphysically, all of that kind of thing. Okay. The 26th, Venus is going to make an inconjunct to Jupiter in Gemini. So again, here we're being challenged within relationship dynamics to maybe grow beyond where we've been when it comes to our perspectives. On the 27th, we're going to have the sun making a trine to Mars. We have a fire trine, so sun in Sagittarius, a trine to Mars and Leo. This is a really positive energy for creative endeavors and directing that arrow to things that we want to accomplish, especially when it comes to identity expression. Moon is going to enter Scorpio later in the day, and then Venus in Capricorn is going to square Chiron in Aries. We might be reflecting on whether or not certain things in our relationship are serving us. We might get some identity wounds triggered and have to navigate that in a relationship dynamic. The 28th, the moon is just going to be in Scorpio. Is that Thanksgiving here? Yeah, so Thanksgiving, the moon's going to be in Scorpio with the frequency of the Venus square to Chiron. Family triggers. Yay. I love it when those things sync up, right? It's just like the universe wants us all to karmically get just dragged through with the ancestral shit. Okay, Friday the 29th, we just again have moon in Scorpio lessons. November 30th, we're going to have a new moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. So we end the month with that new moon energy and start December with more of that new moon frequency. That 9-degree Sagittarius new moon energy is going to be great for setting intentions around what it is we wish to cultivate and learn more of spiritually and bring into our lives. And also, if we have goals when it comes to expanding our horizons of our life, this is a really good time to set intentions towards that. We start December out being in a place that's really positive for us to think about the future and what it is we want and where we want to direct that arrow going ahead. All right, you guys, I'm going to leave us there. This was the November 2024 breakdown, and it's not a bad month, but it's not an easy month. Some people will say, how could you say it's not a bad month with the election and the retrograde and all of that? But I think that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last year, and it's something I've learned in my life just in general, but especially in the last year, is that sometimes everything falling apart and feeling like the worst possible thing is happening, what comes out of that can sometimes be better than what we would have ever done or known if that hadn't happened. But that's also a choice that we have to make too. We have to decide that we're going to do the Phoenix act, it's so easy to let ourselves go, I guess. And that's just not an option to me. If you need an well, not everybody might find it inspiring, but I found Martha Stewart's story on Netflix and that new documentary really inspiring, just with how she was just like, no one's going to take me down. My husband's not going to take me down. The FBI is not going to take me down. Being culturally irrelevant is not going to take me down. Like, she just kept reinventing herself and saying, I'm not going in. And I've been that way in my life too, on obviously like a smaller level. I'm not a famous person, but just like when I've had a lot of transformation and down cycles in my life where, I'm not cool, I'm not welcome, I'm not at the top of my game. I've had a lot of bottoms, a lot of lows, and I'm a fighter. My family's like that. We're fighters, and I think that we can use these moments in history where the scales are tipping, in ways that we don't like or that we feel are unfair or unjust, and it's an opportunity for us to fight for change and maybe even make it better than it was before everything fell to shit. That's my hope, because if we're being really honest, things have never been great. There's always problems. All right, well, that's my 2 cents, and I'm gonna get working on the horoscope videos tonight and hopefully get those uploaded for you guys. If you like this, please hit the like, subscribe to get notified on when I post these. You can find me at theladyofleisure.com and thesobercurator.com, and I will see you guys all in December.